Hi there, and welcome to this video on rearranging formula. Rearranging formula is also known as changing the subject. So you may be asked to change the subject of a formula. For example, if we have m equals 5a, currently m is the subject because m is by itself. And if you're asked to make A the subject, it means we need to rearrange the algebra. We need to manipulate the algebra to ensure that A is by itself. The way we do that is we follow the same rules as if we were solving an equation. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side in order to keep things balanced. So in this question, at the minute, I've got 5a on this side of the equal sign, and I want it just to say a, because I want a to be the subject. This means 5 multiplied by a. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So essentially, that will take this multiply by 5 and put it onto this side as a division. So my working is going to look like this. There's my original question. I'm going to divide 5 from each side. So dividing 5 from this side leaves me with m over 5, or m divided by 5. And if I divide this side by 5, then of course I'm just left with a. Now I have a by itself. I've completed the question because I've made a the subject. This just involved one step of manipulation, but usually rearrangements require 2, 3, or even more steps of rearrangement, of manipulation, to find the subject that you want. If I wanted to make A the subject of this formula, there's my question. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add h to this side, and at the same time I'm going to add h to this side. So it's going to look like that. But at this point, I've still got 7 a's, and that's not what I want. I want a single a by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7. When I divide both sides by 7, I'm now left with a single a, so I've correctly made a the subject. Let's have a look at a few more examples. You can work ahead of me by pausing the video and having a go at the question and the rearrangement yourself. Or if you need a few more examples, you can just stick with me for now and follow my examples for the next few questions. For this one, again, I'm trying to make A the subject. So I want this A by itself. My first step is I'm going to subtract 4 from each side. So I've subtracted 4 from each side. Remember, that is essentially taking this plus 4, putting it on the other side, and making sure you've changed the sign, making sure you've done the opposite operation. Mathematically speaking, though, we've subtracted 4 from each side. Now I'm left with 2 a's, but of course I only want a single a, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. When I divide both sides by 2, I'm left with my single a. I've made a the subject, so I've completed the question. Here's a slightly more different rearrangement. So this is going to need a little bit more manipulation. I'm trying to make A the subject. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to expand the brackets here. 3 multiplied by A is 3A, and 3 multiplied by 1 is 3. So I'm just going to expand those brackets. There we go. Now I want to make this A the subject. So my next step is to subtract 3 from each side. That will remove this plus 3 and place it on this side as a negative 3. But I'm still not finished because I still haven't got a single A as my subject. Now I need to divide by 3. So this side gets divided by 3, as well as this side being divided by 3. That now leaves me with a single A, so I've correctly made A the subject. I'm going to talk through a few more examples, but again, if you want to work ahead, just pause the video and have a go at the questions yourself. I want to make A the subject here. Here's my question. First thing I'm going to manipulate and move is this plus 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from each side. So now I've got a minus 4 on this side. I still don't have A by itself. I'm looking for making A the subject. Currently, it is A squared. So in order to get A by itself, I need to remove this squared. The opposite of squaring is square rooting. So I'm going to square root both sides, which will essentially take this squared, move it onto this side to become a square root. Now I've got my single A and I've made A the subject. Notice that when we take the square root of 4b minus 4, the square root sign, the top of it goes over the full expression. 4b minus 4 is all under the square root sign. Again, we want to make A the subject in this question. There's my there's my question. I'm going to take the plus 5, move it onto this side to make it a negative 5. So I'm subtracting 5 from both sides. I still don't have A by itself. This currently reads as A divided by 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. When I multiply both sides by 3, I'm left with A, so I've correctly made A the subject. Notice when we multiply d minus 5 by 3, we need to ensure that both of the terms are being multiplied by 3, which is why I've put a 3 on the outside of some brackets. This would be good for my final answer because A is by itself, or I could have went and expanded the bracket. A would have still been by itself and isolated on one side. Two more examples from me before I start giving you some questions. But again, if you want to pause the video and work ahead, you can do. I'm still looking to make A the subject. First step I'm going to do is I'm going to take this divide by 5 and move it to the other side to make it a multiply. So I'm multiplying both sides by 5. That's going to give me 5v on this side of the equal sign. Now I'm going to subtract 4 from each side. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And again, I've isolated the A. The A is by itself, so I've correctly rearranged the formula to make A the subject. For this one down here, there's my original question. And then I have subtracted 4g from each side, as well as adding 2a to each side. And the reason I've moved this minus 2a to this side, rather than taking the p to this side, is because then I'm treating this a to make sure it is positive. Because I don't want my final rearrangement to be negative a, I want my subject to be positive a. So I've took the method and the notation to ensure that I have a positive a during my working out. Although at this point, I still don't have a single a, I still need to divide each side by 2. So I've went ahead and divided by 2. So I'm left with p minus 4g over 2 equals a. So a has been isolated and I've made a the subject of that formula. So just to go back to the first line here, you may have thought, or you may have tried to move this p over here by subtracting p from each side. But as you can see, that would have left me with minus 2a. So I would have been dealing with a negative. Yes, you could have went to divide by negative 2 to leave yourself with a single a, but I just prefer to deal with a positive when I can. So you'll notice from that little explanation that I would have ended up with a slightly different rearrangement, and that's okay. In the topic of rearranging formula, you can often have more than one correct answer depending on the way you rearranged and manipulated the algebra. Okay, so now it's your turn to have a go at 4 rearrangements. Following the method I've just discussed in the previous examples, for each of these 4 formula, could you rearrange to make A the subject? If you could pause the video at this point, show me your full working out, your full algebraic manipulation in order to make A the subject. Okay, welcome back to the video. I'll just go ahead and show you my answers, my solutions. I'll quickly talk through the first one here. If I was having a go at this question, first thing I would do is I would take the plus b and put it onto this side by subtracting b from each side. That would leave me with y minus b equaling 2a, but I don't want 2a, I only want a single a, so I then take the multiply by 2 and I divide both sides by 2, and that would isolate the a. Your 4 answers should look something like this. Very well done if you were able to manipulate the algebra to make a the subject in each of those 4 questions. Okay, we're going to get a little bit more complicated now. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some more complicated questions here. What we're trying to do is exactly the same. We're trying to isolate a single letter to make it the subject. So in this question, we're trying to make y the subject. And we're going to manipulate the algebra in order to get the y by itself. Let's have a look at this trickier question. My first step is to expand this bracket. So 3 times y is 3y, 3 times 2x is 6x, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So I just expand that bracket. Now what I'm going to try and do is get the y's on the same side, because I've got a problem here. I'm trying to make y the subject, but I've got 2 of them in this algebra, in this formula. So I need to get them onto the same side. So I'm going to subtract 5y from this side and at the same time subtract 5y from this side. I'm also going to add 3 to this side and add 3 to this side here. So that's the equivalent of taking this minus 3 and adding it on over here. So my next line looks like this. So now I have both of the y's on this side, and that's very important because we want to simplify and ensure we just have a single y in our formula, because that's sort of what we're aiming for. So I'm just going to simplify on the next line. 3y minus 5y takes me to negative 2y. You can see I've also simplified the x's at this point, so there's a lot of algebraic manipulation going on. 1x take away 6x is minus 5x's. At this point here, I'm still not dealing with y. I'm trying to make y the subject. But I do have a multiply by minus 2 on this side. So because I'm multiplying by minus 2, what I wanted was to ensure that I was dealing with a positive y. So I have multiplied everything by minus 1. So you can think about that as taking this minus 2y, putting it on this side, taking this minus 5x plus 3, putting it on this side. So that means the sign of every single term changes. And then I've just wrote it in the order where we've got y on the left-hand side, just for ease. From this point, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And then you can see I finally isolated the y over here. So a much trickier question. It included expanding brackets. We were dealing with 2y, so we had to simplify. We ended up with a minus 2y, which we didn't want to deal with, so we had to manipulate that to become positive. And then finally, we divided by the 2 to leave us with the single y. Okay, another question for me to talk through. Again, you can work ahead if you would like to pause the video. We're trying to make t the subject this time. There's my original question. I'm going to expand this bracket, so 5 multiplied by t and 5 multiplied by minus g. So I've expanded the bracket there. I'm trying to make t the subject, so I want to get the t's on the same side and everything else on the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2t from both sides, so that will end up over here. And I'm going to add 5g to both sides, so I end up with a positive 5g on this side. So that's my next line of working out. Now I can simplify my t's. 5t, take away 2t, leaves me with 3t's. I'm still trying to make a single t the subject of my formula, and this is a multiply by 3, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So I've isolated the t, I've made t the subject. Okay, next one from me. We're trying to make r the subject of this formula. There's my original question. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factorize. I've got an r squared here and an r squared. That's causing me problems because I want to end up with a single r. And because I'm dealing with different terms in front of the r squared, I've removed the r squared as a factor and wrote the remaining terms in brackets. This is a multiply by 4 minus pi. So what I can do is I can divide both sides by 4 minus pi. So that's the same as taking this 4 minus pi, which is a multiply, moving it onto this side of the equal sign, making it a divide, like I've done here. Now I'm left with that equaling r squared, but I don't want r squared as my subject, I just want r. So I'm going to square root both sides, which will remove this squared sign. So when I go ahead and square root both sides, I'm now left with a single r, and this is the completed rearrangement. Last example from me before I give you some questions to work through. This time we're trying to make n the subject of the formula. There's my starting point. First thing I need to do is I need to square both sides. This square root sign acts as a bit of a cage, so we need to remove that first before we can manipulate anything else. So I'm going to square both sides, which will make this t squared. This is a divide by n, so I'm going to multiply both sides by n. Now I'm dealing with two n's, which is a problem because I want to finish with a single n. So I need to get them onto the same side. So I've subtracted n from each side. Now I've got the n's on the same side. I can factorize by putting the n outside of a bracket, leaving me with t squared minus 1. So essentially I've divided this term by n, divided this term by n, and put the n on the outside of the bracket. But I'm still not finished because my n is not isolated, is not by itself. What I need to do now is divide this side by t squared minus 1, and at the same time divide this side by t squared minus 1. Once I do that, then my rearrangement is completed because I'm dealing with the letter n and it is by itself. Okay, again at this point, just a reminder that often with rearranging formula questions, there is more than one answer that would be accepted depending on the way you've approached the rearrangement. Okay, so here is your main task on complex rearrangement. You can see I've placed onto the screen 6 previous exam questions which ask you to make a letter a subject of a formula. For each of the questions, I'd like you to show me your full working out, your full algebraic manipulation, similar to what I've done on the last 3 or 4 examples, showing me each step in order to isolate the variable or the letter you're trying to isolate. If you could pause the video at this point, if you could have a go at all 6 questions showing your full working out, and when you resume the video, I'll show you my fully worked solutions. Could you pause the video at this point, please? Okay, welcome back to the video. I'm just going to show you my worked solution for each question individually. Question 1 should look something like this. Starting with expanding the brackets, then I've added mu to both sides, then I've divided by m to isolate the v. Very well done if you were able to get that correct. Second question should look something like this. You can see my starting point is squaring each side to remove this square root sign, which acts as a cage, and that results in there being a y squared on this side. When you end up with both the y squareds on this side, you will need to factorize by removing y squared as a factor. Because you're dealing with a y squared down here, the opposite of squaring is square root. Very well done if you were able to answer that and make that rearrangement correctly. Question 3 looks something like this. You can see each step of the manipulation. Again, at some point, you're going to need to factorize and remove g as a factor because the original question starts with 2 g's there, which are mixed up in differing terms. So therefore, factorizing is going to leave you with 1g before you can go ahead and divide both sides by 9e minus 4. Question 4 looks something like this. Starting by expanding the brackets, then subtracting 2 pi r squared from both sides, which results in having a minus 2 pi r squared on this side. And we're trying to isolate this h, so we're going to divide by the remaining part of this term, which is 2 pi r, which is why it ends up over here underneath the term a and the term minus 2 pi r squared. Question 5 looks something like this. You can work through my algebra manipulation for each step, and you can see that I've isolated the x at the end, which is what the question asked me to do. And finally, question 6. You can see my starting point was multiplying both sides by t minus 3, which is why I ended up having to add a bracket into my manipulation at this point. Then I went ahead and expanded that bracket, continued the manipulation. We did need to factorize again at some point because we ended up with 2 different t's here and we only wanted a single t. Final step was to divide both sides by m minus 1, leaving me with this correct rearrangement. Very well done if you were able to answer all 6 of those very challenging rearranging formula questions. That shows a very good understanding of the topic of rearranging formula or making a letter the subject of that formula. Very well done.